Welcome, everyone, to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. The fellas enjoying much needed time off after a wild week. Going to break down what happened this week for the Detroit Lions. I understand I've been thinking about over the course of my birthday week what's happened in free agency. What has led some supporters to be a little bit uncomfortable? What's led some supporters to kind of question if the Detroit Lions are legitimate Super Bowl contenders? You look at teams across the league, they're making some bolder moves. But let's start with this, okay? And I think many people that look at free agency start and they look at the Chicago Bears and they look at a football team that made moves along the defensive line, made moves along the offensive line. But starting with the Bears, they are paying for their mistakes in the draft. They are paying for a strategic mistake in 2023 and 2024, focusing a little bit more on skill position than in the trenches. So Ben Johnson goes to the Bears and he quickly realizes that just like what the Lions were able to do, they targeted the trenches right away. So the Lions are not in that boat. So I'm not jealous of the Bears. Yes, they are getting better, but they still have not caught they have not caught at all where the Detroit Lions are at and where they're going. So I look at a couple teams and I say, okay, comparatively, I was impressed with how the Rams have started to kind of creep back into relevancy after their Super Bowl win in a couple of lean years. That's kind of where you look at and you start with the NFC and you go, okay, the Rams are going to make a push. They're serious about 2025. Clearly, they're a serious contender. The Eagles always going to be in the mix when you have Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, that offensive line, and that defense. They're going to rely a little bit more on some younger players, but the Eagles are serious. Even though they've let go of some players, you expect that Howie Roseman is going to maneuver the draft and be able to replenish. Maybe not Super Bowl caliber in 2025, but definitely playoff contenders and somebody to be reckoned with. The team that two teams that are right there, maybe not as close as the Eagles and Rams, are the Commanders and Vikings. And you got to look at it and you say, you still, are relying with the Vikings. They're going to go with a younger quarterback. They're taking the chance. But when you got Justin Jefferson, Addison, you got a good defensive-minded, aggressive defensive coordinator. They're always going to be in the mix, and you can't discount a 14-win year. Even though the Lions, I still think, are a better football team. And Dan, for some reason, some coaches just have a schematic advantage. They just have better prep, better results against certain coaches. And I think that Dan Campbell kind of has figured out kind of how to approach dealing with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, as evidenced by the success in 2024. So my concern level out of 10 is a 7 for the Vikings. My concern level for the Rams is a 9, and the concern level for the Commanders is an 8. So the Rams, to me, are the biggest concern in the NFC right now. I look at it and I say, all right, the Rams are concerning. They're making a move that indicates probably they're going to be aggressive. They've been aggressive in free agency and will be aggressive at the trade deadline. The Commanders clearly have a young up-and-coming quarterback. They made some moves to help give him some more weapons. Clearly, the front office has ties to the 49ers, so they went out and acquired Deebo Samuel. I like some of the moves that they've made as well to upgrade that football team. But now the question mark is that everybody wants to know about, everybody's concerned about, is how much better did the Lions actually get so far in free agency? And we're recapping this on a Saturday, the weekend. Clearly, you had the legal tampering period for those 3 days, which was relatively quiet and brought about a lot of signings of the Lions' own guys. But there were some additions, and we'll talk about them. But did the Lions get better? That's the question. How much better did they get? And I think it starts with the concern level that on the current roster, I think the two biggest question marks that everybody's going to approach is, what are Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson going to look like when they return? And for Aleem McNeil, you would expect probably not getting the full scope of the player that you signed to that massive extension. You're not going to get that probably until mid-season. So that's a question mark. That's why you go out and you get a Roy Lopez. That's why you're probably going to keep DJ Reader on this roster to continue to grow and thrive. And you still got Mekhi Wingo, who's battling. Broderick Martin will be available for competition. And you brought back Levi Onwuzurike. Levi Onwuzurike, I think, is intriguing because many people felt like, okay, he would have been priced out of the Lions market if he would have gotten an offer for 10 million, 12 million. He might have even been priced out if someone gave him 7 million outside of the organization. But clearly, based on his market value outside of Detroit, he was much more valuable to the Lions, and he got a prove-it deal. And so that's advantageous. Everybody that looks at that contract says, okay, you can work with Levi Onwuzurike for that 1-year contract price. And you say, all right, you're paying him less than 10 million a year. You get him for 1 year. You know you're going to get a hungry Levi Onwuzurike. And I love what he said when he spoke to reporters when the Lions free agent spoke to the media. He said, yeah, I definitely got my fair share of pressures. I had a healthier year compared to the years past, but now I got to step it up. Levi Onwuzurike is key. That's a signing that if you can get more value than you got in previous years, if he can increase his sack total, be consistent, elevate his game, now you have another force from a player that can play a couple different spots along your defensive line. I think that a hungry, healthy Levi Onwuzurike should give some Lions fans confidence that, okay, this is a player that should benefit from working with Casey Rogers and have the opportunity to make plays, help Kelvin Shepard's defense. And so the other player that we got to pay attention to is Josh Paschal. I do think that you got to get more out of him. He is a leader, he's capable of being a leader. I think that his development is going to be vital to the success of the Lions. So Levi Onwuzurike and Josh Paschal, two players on this Lions roster that if they take the next step forward, greatly help the Lions' chances in a playoff push. If they don't, you could argue, because look, you know what you're going to get from Aiden, hopefully. You could argue those two players, if they don't develop, it's going to make it massively tougher for the Lions to be successful and to be where they would need to be. So I'm excited to see what Levi Onwuzurike can bring to the table. Aiden Hutchinson and Lee McNeil, those are going to be massive, massive question marks, because if you get them back, at the tail end of the season, November, December, January, as you're making the playoff push, what an added benefit. If you can get, and remember, Aiden Hutchinson suffered that injury to the other leg at Michigan, came back, and has now developed into a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, all-world player, and somebody on the verge of potentially breaking the bank. So if you can get a Lee McNeil, if you can get Aiden Hutchinson producing by the end of the year at a very high level, that just only bodes well. So that's a question mark. I think that's where a lot of the angst is coming from supporters, is they realize, okay, you just watched the Super Bowl where the front four of the Eagles completely neutralized an all-world quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. Neutralized him. Made him look silly. Made him look average. Made him look human. And many people would like to see that similarly with the Detroit Lions. And they took a chance. I do think that if you are gambling with Marcus Davenport, I am wondering if the opportunity to bring back Zadarius Smith is still out there. I think his elevated age might prevent the Lions from bringing him back. But it's a really intriguing subject because, the more you get away from it, the more you say, okay, at that price that he had, maybe he was not going to be a fit financially with the cap. But an affordable contract, a couple $1 million, a lot of incentives, still does make some sense to bring him back. Now, me personally, I could understand why you want to go younger. You probably are going to add 2 more players in the draft that are pass rushers. You still could go get a player down the road here that is a defensive lineman that's solid, but that's nowhere near the cost that a Zadarius Smith could command. And there could be some more interest from some teams down the road for Zadarius that might prevent him from wanting to come back to Detroit. So it's intriguing. I would not be terribly opposed to bringing him back. Look, I clearly, everybody knows that when players end up, later on, I think it's just more advantageous to suit up younger players that can hold up in a playoff grind, can battle through some double teams, can battle through some things. But you clearly see that the Lions, they want their players to fit a certain mold, and they got to be able to stop the run. They got to be able to be somewhat able to win their one-on-one matchups to be able to rush the quarterback. But yeah, the increased sack total, where are they going to come from? That's the biggest question mark. And so the Lions made moves clearly. They did get better. I think that DJ Reed is a slight improvement over Carlton Davis. I think that pairing is going to be something that the Lions are going to count on to be very much a pairing with Tyrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw, DJ Reed, Amik Robertson. That foursome can definitely do a lot of different things to do something um, meaningful with that secondary. I like it. I like that move. I think he brings a good swagger. I think that there's an opportunity to do some things that can help this secondary. I'm impressed. I like the move quickly to target a replacement for Carlton Davis. That number is 20 million. Look, I you could argue that the Lions could have paid it, being that it's around 18 with going up to 20 with incentives, but it kind of indicated that Carlton was just looking for the deal that paid him the most. And it ended up being the New England Patriots, who were a prime candidate because they were flush with salary cap space. So there were opportunities. And I do think that when we look at it, there is clearly a conclusive aspect of it that, okay, yes, at this point, Brad Holmes has not added a bold defensive lineman edge rusher. But I would clearly think that he was in the mix for Josh Sweat, maybe in the mix for some others that eventually landed somewhere else. And there's still an opportunity to get Trey Hendrickson. But with each day that passes, my hope kind of goes down, because you realize that with each passing day, Trey Hendrickson might, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the opportunity with each passing day brings down his price, as the Bengals really want a elevated day one draft pick, and the team that makes the trade also has to extend Trey Hendrickson. That makes it a little bit tougher for a team. But right now, my faith that Trey Hendrickson, probably less than 50%, probably 30% that the Lions land him. But I do think the work is trying to be done. I don't think that the Lions are unaware that Trey Hendrickson is available and could be a nice, solid addition. I do think work is being done diligently to make that happen. It's just the Lions got to get the right price. They don't want to give up too much. And I'm certain that right now the Bengals are asking for the world. And so maybe closer to the draft, there's opportunity to maybe make that move on draft day. Maybe that's the splash that's made in for the Lions on the draft day, is to make that bold trade for a defensive lineman. So we'll see how it progresses. But did the Lions get better? That's the tough part, is that they filled holes in certain spots, obviously, but I do think they slightly improved with the notion of that, okay, DJ Reed is more affordable and a better player than Carlton Davis. So that's an upgrade. But you lost Kevin Zeitler. You still got a hole on the offensive line, maybe potentially with what spot Graham Glasgow is going to play. Many people would say, okay, Graham Glasgow maybe could move back to the right spot, and Christian Mahogany could play left, or whatever position. Right now, Graham Glasgow has to showcase that he can be a contributor and be somebody that can rebound from a down season. So there's going to be opportunities, hopefully, to address the offensive line. You still have the need there, probably depth-wise, for an edge rusher, maybe an impactful edge rusher. But bottom line, I think that the Lions have went out and allocated the resources to the spots they felt like they needed to upgrade. And we'll see now what needs to happen in regards to this football team moving forward. So at this point in time, it's not a final grade yet, but you look around and you say, okay, how would you evaluate in total how the Lions did in free agency? And I give it a solid B. It's not an A. I think that an edge rusher that can secure over 10 sacks, young, affordable, or at least bold, someone that can, like a Trey Hendrickson type, somebody that can definitely would, if you get Trey Hendrickson, you get yourself an A+ for free agency. But, in the absence of an edge rusher, which is always going to be tough, clearly Brad Holmes said, this is tough. It's not as easy as a podcaster or any fan would want, is to go out there and land the edge rusher, because all of the other 31 teams besides the Lions are doing the same thing. The Cardinals probably outbid the Lions for Josh Sweat. Certain edge rushers are getting supremely elevated prices that the Lions simply cannot maybe or not willing to address. So right now, currently, the the free agency grade is a B. And that's a good thing. It's one of those situations where yes, I understand the angst. I understand why fans, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, why the Lions have kind of earned that. And kind of when you start seeing posts around town, everybody's like, well, where's the edge rusher? They announced they did a video mini movie. They did Inside the Den, and all people are talking about is, hey, that edge rusher. And I get that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why fans are nervous about that move and that position. My father-in-law even said, "So what? When the Lions signed a tight end, is that an edge rusher? Is that going to bring down Jalen Hurts? Is that going to bring down Matthew Stafford?" So I understand that perspective. But in regards to setting up the Lions to be successful in the draft, I think this free agency did that. DJ Reed is no discount. I love the fact that he said he chose the Lions over the Commanders. I think that he's going to bring you some versatility, some ability to slow down the number two wideouts, or if opportunities present themselves for him to lock down the number ones, then I think he'll be a gamer. He'll compete. He'll fit in perfectly in this system with Calvin Shepard. I think he's going to be successful, wildly successful, and have a great opportunity to help showcase Terry and Arnold. That's going to be something that I think that the Lions gives them confidence, is the development of some guys on their team. Continued development of Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams should give the Lions confidence that this core group on offense and defense are going to do some things. And then you just got to hope that Aiden and Aleem can be basically like a bonus in the second half of the year and bring some pressures and be where they're as close as to where they need to be, for a playoff push, impactful, healthy, and being able to produce at a high level. So to me, B plus, B, I understand. Solid beats for me. I understand those that would say B plus. I can understand those that maybe look at it a little bit lower and give it a C. You're probably going to see, I don't think you're going to read any publications that really looked at the names or looked at the Lions and what they did and graded and will grade it an A. So I think you're going to read anywhere between a B, B plus to C plus range in regards to the Lions moves. But here for me, I graded a B currently. Next week, probably as the moves kind of continue to flush out, as negotiations take place still. It's still going on. Lions still have an opportunity to make some moves. But for me, it's a solid B. So why are fans nervous about free agency? What's going on? I look at it and I say, all right, there's nervousness around, and the lack of bold moves, the lack of bringing in, hey, you didn't get Myles Garrett, who lied to the world. And it was about the money. And I guess, we all can be naive and believe when people put a graphic and say, I'm about winning. But when someone flashes $40 million with the capability of extending years and giving you life changing money, it's always going to be about the money more than the winning for a lot of athletes. It's just the way it is. That's the definition of being a professional athlete, is to be able to draw some dollars and earn high yielding funds per year. And when a team says, "Oh, you want to be about winning? Here's 40 million. Show us you're about winning." And he's like, "Well, that 40 million is nice. We're not moving you. So accept this deal." And he's like, "Okay." He inked his name because he could have made it. Myles Garrett could have made this a lot more difficult for the Browns, but he didn't. So why are Lions fans nervous about the lack of a bold move? And I think we got to separate out two components. There's the entertainment factor of being a Lions fan and having to pay to watch the football team, and there's a competitive standpoint. And I think that, in thinking about it, that look, the NFL has not shied away from acknowledging it's an entertainment business as well. And the Lions also have raised ticket prices on their fans. And so, just naturally speaking, psychologically, it's the law of, if you've paid money already to see Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams, Jared Goff, you've chanted Jared Goff's name, you've drank as much overpriced alcohol as humanly possible. What else is worth the upwards of 20% more? Bold names: Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson. To shell out money, if I was a paying customer, which I'm not, you know why I'm not. I am a observer and a media member covering the team. So I have access to be able to watch the football team on a week-to-week basis. I am not shelling out my hard-earned dollars anymore. I did. Did I get my money's worth? Hell no. I got it back in spades covering the team and covering the NFL. I recouped my investment with the Detroit Lions, and I'm on the positive side. But now, if I was still a season ticket holder, and I was asked, "Hey, you got to pay 20% more," I want some entertainment for my. I want some more for my entertainment dollar. More big names sell tickets, sell jerseys. And yeah, they Lions have a lot of big names, but those big names did not cash in a Super Bowl. So there's not that brand loyalty just yet to be able to sustain that for a long period of time. Now the Lions are popular; they're a winning team, so the waiting list is still strong. But there will be some drop off if the team continues to not win a Super Bowl. So there's one aspect, and then the other aspect is fans are truly starting to creep a little bit of doubt that the football team can win a Super Bowl. And I understand it. The league's only getting better. Teams are only trying to battle you and trying to make moves and spending and figuring out ways to bring the best players to their teams. The Rams added Devontae Adams to help Matthew Stafford and that young defensive line led by Jared Verse. They got some weapons. The Commanders have built quickly with the strategy of a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels on his first year rookie contract so that you can spend elsewhere. Clear, tried and true strategy. You got the Eagles still, who have the best general manager in the NFL right now, and Howie Roseman still figuring out ways to sustain success after winning a couple of Super Bowls and even getting to the Super Bowl and losing. So you have some competition strong, and then your division is gearing up, knowing that hey, they know how to defeat the Lions, they know how to reboot and figure out ways to try and beat the Lions. Now, last year the Lions were able to have success in the division, but it's just a short 2-year run for the Lions right now. These teams know how to win and they know how to establish themselves. So it's not going to get any easier. So that's where the nervousness comes from is that, yeah, it's not easy and teams can fall off quickly, especially there are some formulas that can come up and creep up that make teams struggle. The Lions, are right there in that they have a first place tough schedule where their toughest games are on the road. So those that are preaching positivity, sometimes just fail to say, hey, there are some risks. We're all hoping that Aiden and Aleem return to health. We're all hoping the team stays healthy. It may not happen. So those are some factors that people say, hey, the more talent you acquire, even if you have to pay for it and even maybe slightly overpay, it gives you more of a chance, especially knowing that in the draft, some people still remember, they didn't forget Brad and the front office may take flyers on developmental picks. They didn't forget Broderick Martin, redshirt year, Hendon Hooker, drafted to develop, not impactful for the Detroit Lions. So then the angst comes in because there are maybe one or two picks the Lions may select that are not going to be impactful. They may be projects. One. Two, now when you make these free agency moves, you're putting ultimate pressure that the defensive linemen you're going to covet are going to be successful because every team can trade up past in front of the Detroit Lions if they target someone. So it may put pressure on the Lions to move up in this year's draft, or maybe with the depth that people say, okay, this class is filled with so many good young prospects along the defensive line that may force this football team to trade down and get some more assets to be able to pick more. So it puts pressure to hit. Now, the Lions can meet that. Brett Holmes, full confidence from everybody that he can draft, but you never know. It's still a gamble. Now, the Lions have shown that that gamble is lessened by their propensity to be solid, but that's where the nervousness is that you're asking for a lot of perfect scenarios for this football team to ultimately win a Super Bowl. That's what it takes, is a lot of luck and a lot of shrewd moves to be able to get past the teams that are also doing the same things you're doing. So there are fans that are realistic. They're not burying their heads in the sand and just throwing up, oh, here's every positive, perfect solution that the Lions can have. Real skepticism is out there, and it's warranted at this point. And but there's also reason for hope, and that's where it's just difficult because if you do get a lot of the things that you're hoping for to come true, if Brad hits the draft, the team stays healthy, there's a great chance for them to compete, but not based on free agency. Free agency is kind of rounding out some depth and replacing some players that were already good contributors. So some of those moves I think were valuable, but I understand the angst. It should always be there until the Lions eventually win a Super Bowl. the level of emptiness that you should feel is there. It's strong and it grows with each passing year. 23 was a golden chance, gone. 24, another good team, 15-win team. Injuries overcame it. Something popped up. What's next? So that's why there's a lot of nervousness. And I agree that it's something that until the Lions win a Super Bowl, that the emptiness feeling should be there. And you hope that the Lions can fill that void with a solid 2025 season. But they did make some moves. They did make a couple moves that I think were valuable for the team. Bringing back Tim Patrick on a 1-year deal up to $4 million, great value again. I think that with Tim Patrick, you look at a player that, oh my God, is going to fit tremendously again in this offense. I think that there's an opportunity for him to excel with John Morton and Jared Goff. And you're going to get, I think now, once a player comes back from injuries that first year, it's about acclimating, it's about getting used to the timing. Another year in the system with John Morton, which is basically similar. There's going to be some tweaks, but the Lions' offensive system is not going to change drastically. Tim Patrick, now another year working with Jared Goff in the offensive scheme, I think is going to be very valuable. Could be used more. I think his 2024 stats, 33 receptions, 394 yards, 3 touchdowns, average reception of 11.9 yards. I think you could get him up there into 50 catches. You could get him up there into being a reliable number 3 and competing for more targets as well. Should teams double Jamison Williams, you should get Tim Patrick a little bit more involved, and also Sam Laporta in that offense, the tight end that I think didn't have the best statistical season, but I think is poised for a rebound year. Tim Patrick, I like. Traditional X-body receiver. The number one thing that as a receiver you like when you can see it clearly on the field is sure-handedness. The ball is pretty sticky to Tim Patrick's hands, and I think that Jared Goff can ultimately rely upon and trust Tim Patrick. I think that his confidence level, staying healthy, should send his confidence level through the roof in 2025, and I think he'll be a key contributor. A good signing. Most people are going to definitely love the fact that he said he only wants to work in Detroit. A lot of good things there, and I do think that the chemistry that he's going to continue to evolve with Jared Goff, who's an accurate passer and can get him the football where he likes it in 2025. Big things. I would expect big things. Probably looking in the neighborhood of 50 catches, 500 to 700 yards, maybe 5 to 6 touchdowns, a little bit more involvement in the red zone. Opportunities should be plenty for Tim Patrick to continue to prove what he's about so that he can get that long-term contract. And then the other move that I think is going to be intriguing is the signing of Kenny Yeboah. And I do think that, look, the Lions typically now are going to have 2 great pass catching tight ends, Brock Wright and Sam Laporta. Definitely guys that both can block and go out in coverage and space and be able to go out there and make plays. But you look at Kenny Yeboah, and I think that clearly it's a reserve role. It's a role that, somebody for depth to be able to block. And look, it's low risk. I don't think the contract terms have been released fully yet, but the odds on usage of this player that's been primarily used as a blocking tight end is to, hey, with a new tight ends coach, be able to add depth, and when there's opportunities in 12 personnel to be able to block and go out there and help Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery when there's red zone opportunities to go out there. And I think that's where, when a season ends, a football team starts to look at, hey, where can we improve? Where in the red zone did we struggle? Well, Zylstra and James Mitchell maybe didn't develop to the degree of being blocking tight ends and versatile enough to retain their services. Maybe Zylstra ends up coming back, but they've decided to part ways. Mitchell's now with the Panthers, and I do think that the Lions could draft a tight end that's also versatile to be able to block. But they need those reliable, big-bodied tight ends to be able to move people. And I think that they looked at what Kenny Yeboah could do, and they felt like, okay, we got a blocking tight end that can be solid in the red zone, that can be solid as well when we want to get those first it brings a smile to my face, because 3rd down and 1 may not be having those empty backfield sets. You may be pounding the rock with some blocking tight ends to be able to move the line of scrimmage. And the Lions probably felt like there were some disadvantages at times in short yardage situations. But when you have a good blocking tight end, that just gives you more options to be able to run the football. So those signings, I think this week, really, you look at it and you say, all right, this Detroit Lions football team is, still in the process of building. It's not awe-inspiring. Look, we can be honest. It's not going to add those season tickets in droves, but this football team is a team that, by and large, I still think is a good football team that's going to win double-digit games. I respect those that have that angst. The pursuit of winning should always be at the forefront. And the Lions, look, I don't think, and here's the other thing too, which is fun. And if I, think about it now, when you add a bunch of talented players, it kind of gives you that confidence that, hey, right now we can start the year because there's still 5 months before any meaningful football is played to be out front in the lead pack race in terms of perception. Right now, the Lions are nowhere near Super Bowl favorites, and maybe that suits them. But right now, others would be considered stronger favorites to be able to compete for the Super Bowl. But that's fine. The Lions, aren't looking to win headlines. They're not looking to win free agency. They're looking to accomplish their goals, and they have their set pattern. But there's question marks for saying, hey, we need to, for the Lions saying we need to target these specific type traits for every player, because those that can poke holes say you still haven't won a Super Bowl. You still haven't done nothing. Have not been there yet. So, and again, you could argue when we look back, if it doesn't end up happening for the Lions, you will look at maybe 2023 as the year that if Brad Holmes was more aggressive at the trade deadline, more aggressive, maybe that year ends up in a more fruitful situation. So we'll see, because we all believe fortune favors the bold, and the Lions have been strategic. And I know that strategic sometimes is not as sexy or as awe-inspiring as bold and inspiring and high priced and all that. So, but again, remember, you're charging fans to follow this to a certain degree. And so when you're asking them to go to Ford Field at a rate that's higher than it was before, you want to give them something to draw them in. I still say Jameer and Jameson and Goff and the offense is good. Scoring 40 points is good, but some name value too as well. So that's why it stunks that the free agency class wasn't as great, but we'll see. We'll see how these moves eventually shake out, and we'll come back. Me and Christian, we'll get after it. Long week, but good week. Thank you for you guys for your early support in March. Thank you for checking in with Lions on SI with the videos and all the content, the podcast. Visit the YouTube channel, everything Detroit Lions on SI. You'll continue to find our work, daily analysis, highlights, videos, podcasts, breaking down everything going on with the Detroit Lions. And so thank you for your continued support. My time's up. I'm going to enjoy my birthday weekend now and get after it, and then come back next week strong. So thank you again for your support. Listen, if you agree, disagree, let me know. I don't talk down to anybody. I have my stance. You share your stance. And as long as we can have a civil dialogue, that's what keeps this going. And I respect those that are positive, but I just have a little bit of a different view. Fortune favors the bold. I take those swings because this team's close. I truly do. So hopefully the aggression can come in maybe at the draft or in the trade deadline period for this football team to get over the hump. I'm John Macaroon. I can't wait to fire it up next time on the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast.